Hello everyone, Namaskar. I welcome all of you to the post-lunch session of the 4-day international online seminar that we have been so wonderfully observing, celebrating, enjoying on temporal and spatial dynamics, a myriad of celebrations, understandings from Indian perspectives. Today is the third day, and we have already had quite a stirring session, I would rather say, in the morning with so many insightful papers. And now we are here to continue the feast. I know after lunch we tend to go a little sloth, but I'm sure all of your insights will only rejuvenate us to to keep that dialogue going. I would like to go back once more to the prayer that we had uttered in the morning. So, just to set the cornerstone to today's presentation, if you will allow me. संसार नाट्य निर्माणे याडवकाश विधानतः पूर्वालंगायते व्योममूर्ति ताम शंकरीं नमः. Who has created this ether, this space for the unfolding of the cosmic play, from where the space and time has generated, let us all pay our obeisance to that unconditioned consciousness. With this, let us move ahead. We, in the past session, have considered quite a bit, and we ended with Obhik Ganguri's paper, who talked about Bharavi's treatment of space in his writing to create the character Arjun. So we have been talking about spaces and multiple layers of spaces and its interpretation. Where stands the writer, where stands the creator, from which point of view do we perceive, and how we perhaps move from various spaces, contribute and create a space of creation where various perceptions and interpretations may flourish. And of course, we have also been observed that the focus or thrust perhaps is not either the space is absolute or non-absolute. It is neither whether art is formless or form, or rather we try to talk about it's about the process. So keeping that same process, bringing that same process forward, today we have quite a bit of papers which will explore the thematic of writing in case of Ramayana, Mahabharata. We have also songs creating space, and of course, we shall talk about the appreciation of art as general from a philosophic point of view. So I welcome all the presenters today, and we would like to begin the session with the first presenter, and I welcome Shomadi, our dear friend Soma Mukherjee. Hello, and
Hello.
yes,
Okay,
can
okay.
we see you, Shomadi? That would be nice. Your video.
That,
Yes,
okay,
thank you.
okay.
She's a dear friend of mine and once my teacher, of course, and
40
so too.
months.
So, to introduce her in my humble words, Dr. Shobha Mukherjee completed her PhD in comparative literature from Jadavpur University. She teaches now comparative literature in the Center for Comparative Literature, Vishwabharati. Her teaching and research interests include Indian literatures of Africa, popular literature and culture, and quite interestingly, what we all have been talking about is Ramakatha tradition. I invite her to share her paper today, titled Reading Indian Literature Through the Modern Retellings of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Shumadi, over to you.
Thank you, Deep. See, the customary, the beginning that I would like to thank Chidakash Kalalay, Center of Art and Divinity, Sangeet Natak Akademi for organizing the seminar and for accepting my abstract. And the special thank you to Dr. P.L. Bhattacharya and Deep Ghosh, friend junior from Jadavpur University. Uh, Today, see, uh, the title of my presentation is Reading Indian Literature Through the Modern Retellings of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. A cursory look at modern Indian literature will reveal that retellings of Puranic stories are a common and popular practice both in the 19th and 20th century. And this literary tradition is still being practiced in the, it is a, see the, that there are several examples we can find from different Indian literatures, even in, say, 21st century India. Examples are many, as most of the languages enjoy the steady flow of literary texts from various genres, where an episode from the Ramayana or Ramkatha or the Mahabharata uh, has been portrayed from a quote unquote new perspective. There are innumerable writers such as Navnita Debshen, Mahashweta Devi, Mallika Sengupta from Bangla, Shri Subramaniam Bharti, Pudumai Pittan, Kumudini or Ranganaika Thattam, Ambai or C.S. Lakshmi from Tamil, Kumaran Ashan, Lalita Lenin, Sara Joseph, K.B. Sri Devi, P.K. Balakrishnan, M.T. Vasudevan Nair from Malayalam, Vijaya Dabe, Kuvempu or Kuppali Venkata Puttappa from Kannada, Volga, Kavana Sarma from Telugu, V.S. Khandekar, Shivaji Sawant, G.N. Dandekar, Ranjit Desai from Marathi, etc. All of them, they engage themselves in this exercise, but this list is not exhaustive. There are so many other, say, the examples. They are there in each and every language system, Indian language system. One has also to remember that all these names represent just a small percentage of writers who are writing or retelling Ramkatha or Mahabharata stories. Besides these literary texts, there are numerous women's folk songs in Telugu, Kannada, and many other Indian languages, where songs about Sita have been performed in the activities of their daily lives. In most of these narratives, the writers argue that without changing the basic structure of the ancient texts, such as Ramkatha and Mahabharata, they have introduced certain interpretation which enforced the reader to look into them from quote unquote new perspective. In her anthology of short story called Sita Theke Shuru, beginning with Sita, Nabanita Debshen describes these new quote unquote new twists as probable possibilities, ja holeo hote parto, a new looking glass through which one can scrutinize these great narratives. In this discussion, taking cue from that technique, we will look into a Malayalam novel called Randa Mujam, or the English translation is um, uh, the probable title. The translated text is called Second Turn. The Randamujan was written by M.T. Vasudevan Nair in 1985. In his introduction, Nair mentioned that, I quote in English translation, I have not changed the framework of the story put together by the first Vyasa Krishna Dvaipayan. The basis for the liberties I have taken is his silence in some portions. I have read between lines and expanded on his pregnant silences. Unquote. In this discussion, we will try to discern the nature and quote unquote representation of these pregnant silences and how they enrich the theme and narrative structure of, say, the different Indian literature and, see, these literary texts. Following this argument, one perceptive reader will see that in the beginning of the novel, Randamujam, there is an invocation about shooters uh, who will sing ballads about the Kuru clan and its genealogy. The genealogy will start from Kuru and will talk about Prathipa, Shantanu, Vichittavirja, Krishna Dvaipayan, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, Vidura, Yudhishthira, about solar and lunar races. So, as literary reader, we should be conscious about the following facts. In ancient India, several terms were associated with the accounts of the past. Some of them are Gatha, Narasamsi, Akhyana or Akhyayika, Itihash, Puran, Vamsha, Charita, Vamshanucharita, Itivritta, etc. Among all these, Itihas as a singular term or with its association with Puran was the most prominent one. The term Itihasya occurs in Atharva Veda. Kautilya mentions Itihash as a compulsory subject of study for a prince training for kingship. The Buddhist work Milinda Panha counted Itihash as an important branch of knowledge. On the other hand, in later Vedic period, the Purana had been renowned as a distinct genre. It means old narrative. There are instances where Purana has been mentioned along with Itihash. The Atharva Veda mentions Puranas along with the four Vedas. And 5th century lexicographer Amar Singha described Purana through its Pancha Lakshmanam. These five Lakshanas are Sharga, creation story of the universe, Pratisharga, recreation of the universe after its destruction, Vangsha, genealogies of God and other beings, Vannantara, the period of time when a particular Manu in every Kalpa is in charge, Vangshanucharita, the history of the kings in the ruling dynasty during the particular Vannantara in question. One can decipher the literary techniques adopted by the modern author within his narrative, through which the invocation section can be linked to the Lakshana of Vangshanucharita and bring forth a fascinating dimension to the novel. Also, in the invocation, the narrator mentioned the Shutas. Primarily, Shutas are the teller of the, say, the who are going to narrate the story, the Puranic story. But there are other references where Shutas are termed as a caste of people who act as close confidante of the king. And in spite of being learned, they do not have right to study the Veda. According to Manushriti, Shutas are mixed caste people born out of Kshatriya father and Brahmana mother. Analyzing the role of Shuta in Puranas, Liugo Rocher mentioned that, I quote, the mixed caste element explains how the Shuta could simultaneously fulfill a Kshatriya function, that of a charioteer, an equerry, and a purely Brahminic role, that of bard and singer, unquote. Quite distinctively, here in Nayar's novel, the Shutas are the teller of the great narrative, and here the narrator is trying to connect with the tradition where he or she can be the Shuta, the teller of the great narrative. Primarily, Nayar's novel has been told through the second Pandava brother, Bhimsena's perspective. The novel begins with the voice of an unnamed narrator who describes the dissolution of Dwarka and extinction of Jadava clan. Bhima's voice takes over the narrative when Draupadi has fallen down during Pandava brothers, all of them, their journey to heaven. Bhima starts his reminiscence from the moment they return to Hastinapur after Pandu and Madri's death. From that moment, the narrative follows the basic plot of Mahabharata, but the novel differs from its classical origin in several aspects. Bhim, in a detached manner, describes his brother's activities, more specifically Yudhishthir and Arjun. Yudhishthir comes across as a jealous, weak character who interprets situation according to his own point of views. In crucial moments, Yudhishthir uses Bhima's physical power to kill Hirimba, Bok, Jarasandha, and so on, but he continuously valorizes Arjun's capability and discredits Bhim as an idiot and simpleton. Here, Arjun becomes a great archer, but he is insecure about Ekalavya and Karna. Kunti and Draupadi are two important women characters, but both of them are manipulative, cold-blooded in some respect. Vima's apparently nonchalant description bring forth the stark reality of Chaturvarna or caste system in society. Incidentally, each episode of the novel differs from the great narrative. Ekalavya does not give away his thumb to Drona as Guru Dakshina, rather someone attacks sleeping Ekalavya and cuts off the fingers of his right hand and runs away. In Baranabat, when Anisha the woman with her 5 sons looks for food from Pandavas, Kunti ruthlessly points out that, I quote, the spies will come to look for charred bodies in a house that has been burned down. They will see six skeletons here tomorrow. Why did one woman with 5 children have to come here for alms? The forefathers have blessed you, unquote. Earlier, Veem describes how the sacrificial animal is never said to have been killed, it is silenced. In a similar manner, these nishadas they become the sacrificial animals who come to Pandavas to be silenced for a quote unquote greater cause. After Ghatotkacha's death in the battle, Krishna rejoices by saying, I quote, even if he was Bhima's son, he was a forester, and like all foresters, a hater of rituals, an enemy of Brahmins. One day I would have had to kill him. It is doubly good that he is dead, unquote. Then Krishna laughed. It was, I quote, it was not for nothing that I sent him against Karna, saying that he was the only hope. Um, the unquote the deep rooted mistrust for lower caste as well as quote unquote tribal people by higher caste powerful groups is evident, and women's oppression also comes quite naturally to this society. Draupadi's humiliation during the dice game is one such instance, but curiously, in this narrative, there are no divine presence during the crucial moment. Rather, Draupadi herself deals with the situation. All the magical or supernatural elements within the grand narrative of Mahabharata have been discarded by the narrator. During the war, Bhim comes to know that the Karna is Kunti's first son. At the time of his death, Vidur reveals to Yudhishthir that Vidur himself is Yudhishthir's father. As an ultimate explanation, Kunti reveals to Bhim that Karna was son of Kunti Vaja's charioteer, and she accepted Vidur as she wants to have a scholar son. Next, she wants a strong man for a son, and she selected a man who, I quote, come out of the forest like a giant unfettered. I did not know his name, unquote. Kunti's revelation provides us with a quote unquote national cause through which we can analyze quote unquote divine parentage of Pandavas. In the end, the unnamed first narrator returns with the parting comments. For the first time in his life, Bhim, after rejecting his secondary position, rejecting heaven, turns towards distant forests where a black beauty, that is Hirimba, is waiting for him. Bhim's first and last defiance turns him into a hero who is embarking on a new unknown journey. The text, by using multiple narrators, constitute a multi-layered narrative structure to bring forth its quote-unquote new or modern perspective. In Tamil authors Ambai or C.S. Lakshmi's story Adavi, or the English translation is called Forest, one can find two narrative tracks, the lives of Chenthiru and Sita, and through both the tracks are narrating different episodes of Sita's and Chenthiru's lives, but side by side they are creating a larger narrative of multiple Sitas. Both the women talk about writing their own stories, and both of them reject their domestic lives and take refuge in forest. At the end of the story, Sita encounters an ascetic in the deep forest who identifies himself as Ravana, who is waiting for Sita. For Ravana, the waiting is not manifestation of his physical lust or desire for Sita, rather he wants to help Sita as a friend from a distance. Showing the Rudravina, Ravana tells Sita that the musical instrument is the manifestation of Devi Parvati's body, and by playing the veena, Sita can come out from the prison of bodily desires. Music is the apparatus through which Sita can be liberated from the prison called body. But Sita refuses to accept the Bina from Ravana's hand. Rather, she insists that she will pick up the Bina from the ground. She says, I quote, it is my life, isn't it? A life that many hands have tossed about like a ball. Now let me take hold of it, take it into my hands, unquote. Here, the message of renunciation and and freedom can be linked to the Buddhist and Jaina literatures. But the pertinent question which can be asked in this context is how to read all these different texts of quote unquote retellings. Should we adopt a single literary analysis where the Malayalam, the Marathi, or the Bengali, or the Tamil are to be restricted within their respective individual literary systems? Or should we approach them from a common narrative technique, that is, retellings of Puranic story? Also, in which ways we will evaluate the quote unquote newness of these stories? As a student of literature, I will analyze this text as part of our quote unquote inherited tradition. I am borrowing this term from Professor Shishir Kumar Das, and how the contemporary reading and writing practices make them part of our contemporary literary tradition. Professor Shishir Kumar Das, when he was talking about Indian literary tradition or the contemporary modern Indian literary tradition, he actually coined two terms called inherited text or tradition and the contemporary text or tradition. There, by saying inherited text tradition, he means say the Ramkatha, Mahabharata, Jataka, all these texts, and say the contemporary text, the which were produced in say the contemporary time. In our general understanding, time generally acts in a linear progression, but we can look at the notions of time in early Indian tradition where time has been perceived as something which moves in endlessly recurring cycles. This cyclical view of the world functions in two levels: the microcosmic level, where recurring process affects the individual, the ceaseless wheels of worldly existence circled around life, death, and rebirth. On the other hand, in the macrocosmic level, the concept of time deals with the larger cycles of social transformation and world creation and destruction. Here we come across concepts such as kalpas, the cycle of see the world creation and destruction, the manvantars, period of Manu, a progenitor of human race, and each manvantars is associated with a group of gods. The yugas, yuga determines the rise and fall of dharma, understood as the rules of proper conduct that depend on the social class as well as on the stage in the life of the individual. The crucial question is how we are using the concept of time in all these modern retellings. Here, in all these above mentioned literary examples, we are looking at different time frame as a narrative technique or tool, which is crucial to the different plots of one story of Ramkatha and Sanskrit Mahabharata. J.L. Mehta, in his essay Doipayan, The Poet of Being and Becoming, talks about the concepts of pratishriti, a pedagogical method by which one gains an insight, and anushriti as being mindful of what has been, and how the two concepts like the pratishriti and anushriti, they create a temporal ethical territory of the epic. The contemporary multiple perspectives of reading Ramkatha or Mahabharata brings together the narrative and the didactic, the human and the ethical, to constitute its own narrative temporality, which can be linear and it can be fragmented in nature, singularly or simultaneously or maybe in an overlapping manner. In this juncture, we can say that all these texts of retellings can be judged through their narrative techniques and how those techniques actually broaden or narrow down the generic tendencies of a specific literary form. Most of the contemporary retellings bring forth a literary journey of more than one genre, where an Itihash Puran becomes a novel, a short story, a poem, and a play, and so on. This specific literary journey across time, place, and languages describes an exchange between the old and the new, between the tradition and the modernity. Also, to analyze the quote unquote new trend of contemporary retellings, one can talk about perspectives centered around class, caste, gender, race, religious identity, etc. But one should remember, retelling is not a modern literary phenomena, making its presence felt only in the modern times. Rather, we can cite the example of Kalidas's Obhigyan Shakuntalam. The text itself is a retelling of Mahabharata's Shakuntala story. In this context, A.K. Warder argues that the dominating theory of the aesthetic experience Russia, which is very ancient but which has grown steadily in scope and pervasiveness throughout the history of Kabba, had a powerful effect on the work of the Kavis. And thus, the earlier Kabbas are remarkable for their variety of stories, whereas in later times we find the same stories only with endless variations, selected again and again by anxious writers who are in fact most anxious to be original. The reason for this lack of obvious novelty is to be found in the theory, particularly in the works of Anantak. It is a new way of producing Russia, new expressions, rich in implication, new incidents and situation in human intercourse. Warder is going to kind of continue to talk about this particular point, and I quote that indeed it may serve much better than a new one, for the familiarity of the characters and the general outline of the story serve as common ground for writer and reader, which which need not be laboriously described in order to bring the reader on the scene and acquaint him with the situation. The writer can immediately get down to the more intimate and congenial task of creating universal types of the infinitely varied incident of life. Let the hero be Ram or Yudhishthir or Udayan or Sita or Bashabdatta. Common humanity, common emotions like the reader, the writer, and the hero in a moment of struggle or repose, joy or sorrow or anger. The reader enters easily into relationship with the familiar hero and so appreciate fully his surprise or delight at the unexpected incident with which the writer's originality upsets the course of the struggle. Unquote. Brinda Dalmia, in her essay Pure Story, Impure Agency and Retellings of the Mahabharata, argues that retellings are embedded within the Sanskrit Mahabharata. The Sanskrit text is framed uh, as a retelling of the Great War by Shauti Ugroshoba in Noimasha forest in front of a group of sages, where he is narrating the episode of Janmejay's snakes. See the Janmejay's narrative, which he is narrating in front of, see the gathering of Parikshit when Parikshit is performing the sacrifice. Vaishampayan retold the story which he heard from Vyasa himself. But Vaishampayan is not the only listener. So Sanskrit Mahabharata itself is working in multiple temporal levels. And by citing Ugroshaba's comment, um, I quote, some birds have already sung this itihas, some again are teaching it to others. Others, no doubt, will do the same hereafter on earth. Unquote. Dalmia, by citing this particular quotation, argues the structure of Sanskrit text is working as a multi-layered text in various temporal levels, and future retellings is the inevitable characteristics of the text. This analysis creates a literary journey where all these varied texts of Puranic retellings can be placed and studied as part of a long literary history. The analysis is a possible reading of contemporary Puranic retellings, as these contemporary texts do try to incorporate the past narrative structure into its own. The well known and the popular stories offer possibilities through which one can understand not only the past but also the present. Um, and this literary study facilitates this process of the numerous variation. These variations change their location, language structures, narrative techniques, generic configuration, and can light up a given time. And it can be part of a large yet fragmented pluralistic literary system. Um, Thank you. Sorry, Deep. Probably I kind of take too much time.
Uh, no, you speak about time, but you are well within the frame of time. So you are well aware of the empirical time, if I may put so. So before I share my observations, I would like to open the session to all the other participants if they have any other question. We also have retellings and understanding of Mahabharata and retellings of Ramayana in some capacity if they would like to ask anything. So open to everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. This was a really new vision you have enlightened in front of us. So very much thankful for that. This was very new thing to everyone. Like the way you have seen Mahabharata Ramayana. So thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you. But it's not a new thing. There are already existing works which
But,
actually talks
but
about,
your
say, all these work they are talking about all these things.
yeah, your interpretation is very different. So I really liked it. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
So
Deep.
as we say, we need an observer in order to act upon. So things may lie around, but until unless one acts upon it, the space is perhaps not recognized as space. So you talk about time, but I was, quite interestingly, you have touched upon the notion of space as well. If I to add, we are going to have, if I should wait at all for the next paper, that you mentioned about Aranya, the forest, Ambais, and we get to see that two Sitas, they get into that forest. So, I could see that in a wonderful way, the notional idea of forest as a space is getting changed over there. What we have seen also in the literature of Aranyak, and later on also in the later literatures, we see that Aranya is just a place of renunciation, and that comes at the
Uh,
third stage of your life. If I
See, all probably whatever you are saying is kind of right, but I think along with that, when Ambai is writing forest, as far as the say the English translation is concerned, if you look at the say the English translated text, then you will realize that not only that uh, if we are talking about Tamil Ramayana, we usually talk about Kamban Ramayana. But if you look at this particular text, that there are certain say the overlapping say the narrative tradition, that some of the episodes are coming from say the folk tradition. Say there are that if you look at the Southeast Asian say the variations, there are certain interconnection, like she is bringing those episodes even into her narrative. That way, that the written the quote tradition, the written tradition, the folk tradition, and the tradition which probably is migrating towards see the other areas, she is bringing together all of them and creating a particular, see the space, a sense of, see the multi-layered space and see the time. And as you have pointed out, that probably there are, say, the hints of Paumacharya, that where Sita actually renounced in the end, say, the everything and went to forest. All probably that, uh, say, the, what can I say? That we can look at that particular approach when we are reading this particular text also.
Yeah, and that's so, well put, actually. And we have been talking about this thing in the last session itself, where Chandradasan ji mentioned that the moment we talk about, or rather we use these words such as folk, it becomes problematic. So we need to see that these perhaps we can understand it as a written tradition, or rather tradition, those who have written evidences, and the traditions, those who have oral evidences, and perhaps not to say, and to merge those spaces and those ideas of time, we get to see new creative time and new creative space which is coming up. So that's so well observed by you, Shumadi. Thank you so much for your paper. Well, at
Thank
least,
you. But you have, if you have any other interpretation, tell me later.
of course, that we can have a dialogue later on.
Hmm.
Yes, if anybody else would like to add anything, um, he or she may. So yeah, we are looking forward to your paper, submission of the paper. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
And we move on. And as we have been talking about the space of forest itself and the notional space that is there, we have now with us Shreya Mukherjee. I welcome her. To introduce Shreya, Shreya Mukherjee is a research scholar at the Department of Indian and World Literatures in English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. She's working on the representation of motherhoods in the Indian epics for her doctoral research. Her areas of interests are mythology, women's writing, translation studies, and post-colonial literature. She has qualified for the UGC Junior Research Fellowship in 2022. She did her MA in English Literature from English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad itself, and she completed her BA in English Literature from Banaras Hindu University. And I welcome her today to present her paper, Navigating the Wild, Interrogating the Spatial Dynamics of the Forest in the Mahabharata. And I'm personally looking forward to her paper. Shreya, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. So, good afternoon to everyone. I am Shreya Mukherjee, and I am extremely honored to be given this opportunity to be speaking among such brilliant academics and performers of of performative arts. And I express my heartfelt gratitude to PL sir and Deep sir for giving me, and Sangeet Natak Akademi for giving me this opportunity for selecting my abstract. So I will be presenting my PPT. So I'll be sharing my screen shortly. Sir, this host disabled participant screen sharing.
Shubhendu, if you could just check into just a moment.
Yes, sir.
I'm so sorry for your
No problem,
inconvenience
sir.
caused. You shall have it in a while.
Okay, sir.
Is it enabled, Digantaji?
Deep, you just tell what you need to know.
Just to enable the multiple share option so that
And
Shreya may begin her presentation.
okay, done. You can share. Shreya, you
Yes,
can.
yes, I'm sharing.
Sorry for the interruption. Sorry.
No problem, sir. So the title of my presentation today is Navigating the Wild, Interrogating the Spatial Dynamics of the Forest in the Mahabharata. In this paper, I will be looking primarily at how the forest is conceptualized in Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, the civilized settlements and the forest are accorded equal importance. To corroborate my contention, I would argue that approximately as many episodes of Mahabharata have settled society as their setting, as there are sections taking place in forest and wilderness. The first section of Mahabharata, that is the Anukramanika Parva, unfolds in the Naimisha Aranya, where Kulapati Shaunaka is officiating a 12-year sacrifice. It is here that Ugrashava Sauti narrates the story to the rishis present in the 12-year sacrifice, as it had once been recited by Vaishampayana to King Janmajaya at his Sarpa Satra, that is his snake sacrifice. In the Ayurvedic concept of different ecozones, also known as karas, the uncultivated, unsettled land was known as aranya, which was further divided into two distinct categories depending on their ecological characteristics. One was Jangala, the dry forest area, and the second one was Anupa, or the marshy aranya. While the former is usually associated with the western part of Indian subcontinent, the latter is usually found in the eastern part of India. Jangala is supposed to be an area of dry climate which leads to excess of the Ayurvedic humorous wind, Vata, and bile, Pitta, whereas the unctuous climate of the Anupa leads to the dominance of flame, Kapha, and wind. This now brings us to the question how the forest was conceptualized in the narratological schema of this epic. Mahabharata constructs the spatial dynamics of the forest in a way that is distinct from the modern notion of the fragility of nature that necessitates its protection by humans. Forest has occupied a pivotal place in the ancient Indian philosophy. It has featured as early as in the Rigvedic hymn to the Aranyani, or the goddess of forest. Likewise, the Aranyakas and the Upanishads are known to have been composed by the rishis dwelling in their forest hermitages. In Anushasan Parva, planting trees is conceptualized as a virtual act, no less sacred than the Vedic sacrifices. And I quote from Anushasan Parva: the planter of a tree is saved in the next world by the trees he plants, like children saving their own father. The forests are an important aspect in the lives of not only rishis who ventured on the path of renunciation, but also of regular grihastha or householders. As every human being is enjoined by the Chaturashrama system to observe the Vanprastha stage at the appropriate time in their life, Vanprastha could be literally translated to mean way of the forest and have been given due importance in the Mahabharata. Members from every generation of the Kuru dynasty, beginning from Satyavati and her daughters-in-law Ambika and Ambalika, and Kunti, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari in the next generation, to the Pandavas and Draupadi, had renounced their palace and ventured forth to forest in the last stage of their lives. However, the relationship of the civilized settlement with the wilderness of forest was not always harmonious, but rather conflictual at times. Forest was the abode of several non-Aryan tribes such as the Rakshasas, Nagas, Kirata, Shabara, and Pulinda, among others. These tribes were not subordinate to the Varna system, but were rather excluded from the Vedic Varna order. But exclusion doesn't necessarily imply antagonism. There are instances of marital alliances between the Kshatriya Pandavas and women from the forest tribe. The most notable being Bhim's marriage with the Rakshasa woman Hidimba and Arjuna's union with the Naga princess Ulupi. Both these unions resulted in the birth of valorous sons who played a crucial role in the Pandava army during the Kurukshetra war. However, the relationship between the Vedic Varna order and forest tribes was at times rather conflictual, especially when one tried to encroach into the other's territory. Bhim was challenged by the Rakshasa chieftain Hidim, the brother of Hidimba, because he perceived Bhim and the others to be encroaching into the territory reserved exclusively for his clan. Alternatively, Bakasura, he was also part of the forest tribe and therefore an outsider to the Varna order, attempted to assert his dominion over the village of Ekchakra, and therefore he had to die at the hands of Bhim for his attempt to infringe into the civilized settlement. Since forest was conceptualized primarily as the site of exile, hermitage, and hunting, it was but inevitable that the civilized settlement would have a dichotomous relationship with the wilderness of forest. If the Varna order of the civilized space is perceived as the self, then the forest with its charm and dangers becomes the unknown other. And therefore, the relation between both is marked by a distinctive undercurrent of tension. It is also interesting to note that those who renounce the way of Grihastha in their search for Brahma Gyan or Moksha always headed towards the isolation and wilderness of the forest. Forest was a designated site to seek the absolute or Brahman, as the wilderness allowed the seeker to transcend the bounds of samsara and its maya and immerse oneself in the search of the ultimate reality through experiencing the unknown. As a site of hunting, the forests are intricately associated with the ambitious excursion of royal hunt. The royal hunt was not only a leisurely activity indulged in by the king, but also a symbolic assertion of his dominion on the uncharted wilderness of the forest. However, the forest did not present itself as a passive turf to be easily conquered by the aggressor. Rather, it seemed to fight back with equal ferocity. In Mahabharata, hunting excursions usually had deleterious impact on the lives of the kings. For instance, Pandu, who had killed the deer that was sage Kimdama in disguise, accrued the curse of prohibition of sexual intercourse, which virtually rendered him incapable of biologically fathering children. Similarly, Karna, who mistakenly kills a Brahman's cow during a hunting expedition, is cursed by the aggrieved Brahman to be killed in a state of helplessness. The forest therefore transformed the hunter who entered its domain into a hunted by afflicting him with arrows of curses and misfortune. Though hunting is a symbolically significant activity, it is nevertheless classified as one of the four cardinal vices to be avoided by the king, the other three vices being drinking, gambling, and womanizing. Pandavas and their sojourn in the forest. Having been born and spent the formative years of their lives in the forest hermitages, the Pandavas shared an intimate relationship with the forests. Throughout their lives, they spent several extended periods of time in forest owing to various circumstances. After escaping the assassination plot hatched by Duryodhana in the form of an inflammable Lakshagraha, house of lac in Varnavrat, the Pandavas spent several years incognito, wandering around various forests and villages before securing the alliance of the powerful king Draupada. Later, they also spent 12 years of exile in forest after Yudhishthir lost his kingdom in the rigged game of dice with Duryodhan. The forest becomes a crucible where they confront demons, vicious animals, and their own humanity. Though Pandavas encountered the forest mostly as destitute refugees, there are instances where they resorted to violence to claim ownership over the forest. The most famous example being the carnage unleashed by Arjun and Krishna at the Khandava forest, an epic that reiterates the message of Ahimsa Parmo Dharma. It is interesting to note that there has been no attempt to justify the brutal extermination of Khandava forest and its dwellers throughout the narrative. Iravati Karve, however, philosophizes that the Pandavas did not escape the karmic consequences of their violent action at Khandava forest. The famous palace that was built in their capital city of Indraprastha by the Asur Maya, who was one of the 6 survivors of the carnage, did not accord peace and happiness to the Pandavas. The palace was the setting of the infamous game of dice and Draupadi's mocking of Duryodhana, which later instigated him to plot his revenge against the Pandavas by inviting them to a rigged game of dice in Hastinapur. However, the Pandavas' journey does not conclude with the mastery over the forest. Instead, they return to it as exiles, learning essential lessons of humility and shedding royal arrogance. The forest, in this context, becomes a metaphorical teacher, reshaping the Pandavas' worldview. It is during their 12 years of exile in forest, the Pandavas attain not only spiritual maturation, but also an insight into their own self. During the Van Parva, it is Yudhishthir who saves his brothers twice from near death experiences. Once during the Yaksha Prashna episode, and in other instance, Yudhishthir counterintuitively saves the mighty Bhim from the deadly grasp of the snake Nahusha, thereby highlighting the fact that physical might is not always a guarantee of triumphing over enemies. Likewise, Arjuna also has to perform tapas in order to mentally prepare himself before acquiring the divine weapons that is eventually bestowed on him by Lord Shiva. It could therefore be concluded that in Mahabharata, the forest is not merely a passive backdrop, but an active participant in the narrative, influencing the trajectory of the epic's plot. By navigating the wilderness, the characters confront challenges that mirror the complexities of life, morality, and duty. The forests serve as a metaphorical and transformative realm in which character development, moral dilemmas, and the unfolding of destiny takes place. The intricacies of spatial dynamics which the forests reveal profound insights into the human condition, societal norms, and the cosmic order as depicted in the epic. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Shreya, for this paper. I personally was really looking forward to it. And as we were discussing right prior to a paper, we have some observations um, arrived from Dr. Ipshita Chandu from the last session, where she also mentions, as we were just about to say, that not just the human beings, but the demons also lived in there, the Danavas, in the Adavi. It is also inhabited by Vanavasis also. Sages live there. And so she's, more, she's thinking about the Karnagi's journey as we find. Also, Shoma Mukherjee would be able to contribute to it. Her journey into the hill people. So and she says that the categories perhaps they need to be rethought or constructed, even the dynamic ones. So what we call is this. So a new dimension of forest as a literary space, so to speak, perhaps. So with this, I open the session. If anybody would like to add anything, ask any question, may do so.
Probably not a question, but see the forest. Shreya ended her paper with saying that forest, like it can be a metaphor, it can be a symbol, but it can be a character also. And as you are talking about like the Tamil epics, but if we look at that Shangam poetry, that in Shangam poetry, like the signs in that particular day, in the first day when she was presenting a particular paper, one of the presenter, and there I thought about the fact that when we are talking about the sign system of Sangam poetry, more specifically Akam poetry, that the natural flora and fauna and the natural settings, they actually evoke a certain kind of emotion, and where the each flower or maybe with the each tree or animal, they are not they individually they are signs, but collectively they are creating another sign to read that particular poem or maybe that particular tradition. Forest, and if you remember that Ramayana, because she is talking about Mahabharata, but in Ramayana, the way forest is described in Aranya Kando and the forest in Kishkinda Kando, the Ram Viraha, and when he is in Kishkinda and looking at the nature, that each and every episodes, the human, like the forest, we are looking at forest from the perspective of, say, a particular human being's perspective. If we are stereotyping forest as say the space for forest dwellers, etc., and the court and the forest, these kind of binaries, but these are, see, the human perception, and how human beings, they are experiencing that space and bringing up that particular space into his or her narrative. I don't know, probably I am what I am trying to say, whether it is kind of making any sense or not. But I'm thinking about these things. So when I am kind of whatever she is saying, I don't know whether you want to add anything else.
Shreya should be answering this.
Mm, yes, I was looking at how forest and the civilization, they were at conflict with each other. And during Mauryan period, for example, because forest was always looked at as a place of resources, and that is why, like, there is a episode in Anushas in Vanaparva, where the Pandavas are in their 12 years of exile, and then they are in Dvaitavana, and then Yudhishthir get that episode is named as Mriga Swapna Parva, where he gets the message in the form of dream that the deers are saying that please don't exterminate us, because of you all rishis and several people are coming, and there has been a spike in hunting, and we are getting exterminated. So and then they move to another forest, which is Kamyaka one. So I when I was reading it, I felt that they are not seeing the forest as as an entity in itself. I think they are seeing it as a place of as a resource for themselves. So that is why I feel, but though there are instructions that you should be compassionate towards forest, but because of your own good, in the long term you are going to be served by these resources, you will be needing them for your expansion, your urbanization projects and all. So that's what I felt while reading the perception of forests.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
So to bring things together, as Manjula ji also last day mentioned, that the space is there. Okay. So it is a container. Now, how you fill in it, of course. So it has to be perceived. So that perception will, of course, matter in a way. Also, another, just to, I would not, and sorry to keep my video paused for a while. The network is fluctuating. I hope I'm audible still. Right. So there's an also another observing um, among certain scholars, those who try look at forest as, or rather the entire landscape, the kshetra of Bharatvarsha as a body, and also going back into the forest in a way at times when it comes to Dandakaranya, where is to either in a very, as we talked discussed about yogic perception of understanding performance and literature in Mandyakini Trivedi's literature, we can go back and understand this is how it also has a layered, because what I can find that she has wonderfully explored the Abhidha segment of it. What is there exactly, what Bharata says, and the narrative as it is, the creative space of that, or the narrative space of it. But if we can, if possible, extend a bit and add a bit yogic understanding. So, and to use the word metaphor once more, it will be as a process of understanding your own self in a way. And the third level, which is also there, is perhaps to bring in a cosmological point of view. But again, I do not wish to thrust my perspective onto her. But as we say that the interpretations and layers can be myriad of one. And of course, we need to begin at the Abhidha level. And what she has done is, I think it's a quite good thinking from her part. And thank you, Shomadi, also to contribute to the discussion. Let us move on, and I welcome the next speaker for the day. We have been talking about the space in and time in case of literature, and today we will see in our next presenter's paper how music, it creates a sense of space, and it segregates space and redefines space through characterization, and how with the instrumentalization perhaps in no older genre but in a very modern genre, and in some of the really celebrated films, Indian films, she will talk about it. I welcome Pritika Kainth to this wonderful seminar and to share her paper. To introduce her in a few words, Pritika Kainth is presently a PhD candidate at the University School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Guru Gobind Singh, Indraprastha University, New Delhi. Her proposed thesis focuses on unraveling the relationship between love, longing, and life through interaction of tragic and comic action, particularly in Shakespearean play. Her research endeavors traverse through varied expressions of art and literature with an overarching goal to comprehend the intricacies of human emotions. And she is here today to present a paper titled Rhythms and Musicalities of Love, exploring the melodies in Bharadwaj's Haider and Makbul. Of course, we are quite intrigued, even when we received her abstract, and we did a bit of discussion through email as well. And now I welcome Pritika to share her paper. Over to you.
I would like to, am I audible? Okay. So I would like to begin with a heartfelt gratitude for giving me an opportunity to be able to share my paper. As you already mentioned, the title of my paper is Rhythms and Musicalities of Love, Exploring the Melodies in Bhardwaj's Haider and Makbul. So before I begin, I think it necessary to share my point of location. I would like to share that I am a young student, a non-performer, but an ardent lover of all artistic expressions and mediums. While I have spent last 2 days with new thoughts, new learnings, I also gave a long thought to what compelled me to pursue human emotions or love. Why and what is it that convinces me to engage with love? And I think I found this answer in an anecdote, a memory perhaps, which I read a long time back, and I would begin with sharing that anecdote with you all. So the anecdote goes as there was once a play happening in a playhouse. So everyone was excited. So there were people from diverse backgrounds and they came to look at the play. It is at one moment when this character calls a few of the people from who are standing right next to the stage to come and become a part of the performance. So he calls a few people and he says, okay, come sit and become the courtiers. Now these people are sitting and this play has reached a very important juncture, and there is this one person from the back of the audience. He comes up and calls one person who is now sitting on the stage. This person responds to that call, he gets up and leaves. So at this critical juncture, there is a burst of laughter. Perhaps this play was Romeo and Juliet, or maybe it was Heather, maybe it was Hamlet, it was King Lear. That is not important. What I feel is important is that it makes me wonder as to what happens when a man on stage says invisible and he is peeping into another's conversation and he's completely aware of his presence on stage. How this man communicates his emotions through his body movements and his facial expressions while the audience enjoys the climax. So you see, in that very moment, not only is the audience a witness to an artistic creation, it equally participates. It celebrates the humanness in its entirety, where the artist is aware of audience's presence. So, as an audience, I understand that the artist has all the means to perhaps communicate with the organicity of the universe, of the intricacies and ambiguities of the universe, and he creates a moment which aligns with both space and time. And as a non performer, I must always engage with life through the metaphorical essence, which is creatively and critically evoked or emoted by the artist. But there is one aspect to this craft that I'm not a stranger to. And the very aspect of his craft is layered with an organicity, which is not forced but only comes natural to his being. This organicity is a felt emotion that breaks the cyclic mundanity of space and time and connects with me at the most humane level. It is this quest for an organic form, beauty, or truth, whatever you may call it, that I perceive as love. This exactly is my intent, to understand love through Faiz and Khusro as invoked in Heather and Makbul. The paper works on three levels: text, where it shifts from stage to a cinematic representation, and then through the narration, where through an invocation, a thought which resides in the Sufi tradition is invoked or provoked. So I initiated my talk with the anecdote because I wanted to remind all of us of the vicarious experience of a stage or a dramatic performance and how spontaneously such an experience unfolds before us. There is a dialogic coexistence, an organic cohesion, not only among the characters, plot, props, dialogues, movements, rhythms, bhav, but also with the audience, where the audience shares all human emotions with the artist. They stay within audience's heart as a modified sensibility, as a collective consciousness which weaves our humanness with a delicate emotional depth. Moving in time, we have largely replaced theaters with LED screens, and experiences have have turned into two-dimensional cinematic frames, and the distance is quite apparent. If you ask me, I feel this is only reflective of our times, and yet as I said, an artist, a performer, would always dream the impossible dream, shall right the unwritable wrong. I'm quoting this from the movie Man of La Mancha. And hence, to fill this gap, the distance which has silently creeped into our personal spaces and ways of living, Bhardwaj throws through the songs intends to minimize this gap and reverse the order and inorganicity of our time, space, and his cinematic medium through invocation of Faiz and Khusro's Sufi tradition. My paper sheds light on a few aspects of this tradition of love. While invocations are very common, as Amrita Preetham says, Aj akhaਂ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਤੋਂ ਕਬਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬੋਲ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਕਿਤਾਬੇ ਇਸ਼ਕ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਅਗਲਾ ਵਰਕਾ ਫੂਲ, the introduction of Faiz and Khusro creates a wider spectrum when seen in juxtaposition to the folk song from Kashmir, Roshe Wala Mayane Dilbaro, Poshe Bahara of Vyur Valo, and Jhinmin Jini in Makbul. Apart from introducing a mindful randomness, fluidity, hasi thitholi, lady sangeet with a dholak, it opens another wide spectrum. It introduces a naivety and innocence which he juxtaposes against Faiz's Gulo Mein Rang Bhare, where Gulshan is no more than a dream. Kashmir's heart longs for peace, for beauty that does not fade, and a time where Pehli Si Mohabbat is possible. Another important aspect through Khusro is the idea of rang. If stage is a canvas of myriad possibilities, and the artist and the audience are both colored in the sanguinity of realization and awareness of life, then rang, as deepened by the expressions of love, also holds the violence which continuously puts its essence on trial. Underlining this very abstraction of rang, color, and the nexus of power, material, wealth, and authority, the paper further dwells on Khusro's Ulti Waki Dhar and how this resonates with an artist's attempt to reverse the restrictions of religion, norms, social and cultural fabric to seek the Sehaj state of living as highlighted through Kabir's philosophy. The paper then proceeds on to exploring the thought of this Sehaj form and how folk artists engage with their crafts, where tambura only becomes one of the many mediums to meditatively engage with space within and without. It talks of an organic and elemental musical echo, inspiring and captivating the audience in a surreal resolve where beauty is truth, truth, beauty. Love then becomes an emotional union which trickles onto the artist through his sadhana and reaches the audience, shattering all social and cultural barriers, pulling the past, present, and the future in a delicate thread with a genie essence. This fleeting moment is a celebration of our existence. Under this light, Bhardwaj's invocation then seems as a poetic intervention which reminds the present of an old order which was rooted in love, compassion, and empathy, which loved regardless of social positions and transcended to an ecstatic celebration where the transactional nature of life did not cancel the order of love, but only supplemented it. And perhaps in a world as that, we all flow together as rivers on our own accords and with a self effacing sensibility we disappear and coexist with the vastness and ambiguity of life. Finally, I would only like to conclude that my paper works at three levels, citing only literature as critical and creative framework. My paper tries to give three shades of love, one given by the folk songs and adding a profound layer to that naivety through fairs, and finally the third level of thought through Khusro and Kabir. In this way, my paper goes into a layered understanding of love, and then it tries to understand this in context of the movie and how it is only reversed alignment when compared to the relational matrix, and it is this reverse movement that my paper stands critical of. Thank you.
Thank you, Pritika. Before I assert my observation, I would like to open the session for anyone who would like to add anything, ask anything to Pritika. May do so now. I love the thought segment that you say that when that through one particular thought, it is bringing in the experience of past and how it creates a new. I would also ask to see how do you look at the introduction of the musical element, the instruments that is used, especially in case of Haider, and to create a distinct sense. Now, I'm not talking about just by the introduction of musical instruments to create the Kashmiriness or whatever, but to create tension and to create space, perhaps, because we get to see that certain instruments are introduced at the arrival of certain characters, and they also try to create a dialogue amongst themselves, and thus we see also a progression of the plot, if you ever have looked at it in that way.
While this is a wonderful insight, but I think I will have to go back and reflect again. And then maybe when I'll submit my paper, and then I'll add all of these elements, which essentially is a very amazing insight, because now I can actually make sense of how different musical elements come at a very different time. But I think when I submit my paper, then I'll be able to add that better.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to add anything? No, but I really love that, and I thought it could be added to it. It would only I don't wish to say it would enrich the paper, or because it readily came out of it. So as we say that we are here to share the space to create a dialogue, and perhaps this is what we meant actually.
Yes.
Yes.
See, Deep, probably, I don't know, that when I am looking at Haider or Maqbool, see, primarily, say, in my mind already, the play, the structure, the characters, the plot, all of them are there. So when I am looking at, say, any adaptation, even if it is performance, like I am looking at watching a play, or maybe when I am watching a film, see, every time what I am looking at the see the new twist apparently. The audiovisual medium has a certain kind of language, a certain kind of technique. So as a the Shakespeare, the long way back, the way he perceived his idea of play, and now when people are adopting Shakespeare as a play in different performative space, that each and every space has its own politics. So what I am trying to project, what is my objective, how I am looking, using a particular song of the Faiz Ahmed's Faiz, which is popular in the subcontinent, not only in the quote unquote India, but also in the, if I am saying even if it is a problematic term, but if I say South Asia, that from several location, people are, there are quote unquote, as Deep actually pointed out, that when we are using the word folk, that there are times we are using it in a homogenized way, or maybe there are times when we have to look at it as from a different perspective. Probably we have to problematize that particular idea. And the other thing is that when we are talking about Shakespeare and play, etc., that if we go back to the quote unquote, the European West, if we look at the Greek dramaturgy, or maybe more specifically the comedy, like Plautus's comedy, where uh, in Pseudolus the character actually directly addressing the audience, or maybe when we are looking at the quote unquote Indian tradition, we are looking at a particular tradition where the characters, they are saying that today we are going to play this particular play of that particular writer. So they are making, the audience is conscious about the fact that it is a play, it is a performative space. uh, so I don't know, it is not a particularly question. I am trying to probably point towards the certain the contact zones through which we can read these quote unquote films which are adopting the earlier play or playwrights like Shakespeare.
Um, uh, I don't know if, since it was not a question, I would only like to add here that, the fact that I've written a paper on melodies or songs, it is because, my idea of comparing it to the performative space of a stage was because that fluidity, that echo, when you look at Heather, when you look at Makbul, you do understand that it is coming from a thought which is already existed, and there are nuances which Bhardwaj has added. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of intellectual rigor added to those narratives, and it is very essential that we break that intellectual rigor and go to a point where we can intuitively reflect on a play, or on relational matrix, or the politics of the medium, or the surrounding, the space, the settings, the times. And I think it is then very important for me to connect to the songs, especially those which already have created an impact, as you mentioned, because then it creates for me a blend of intellectual rigor, a good narration, a, along with an intuitive reflection which will stay with me for some time. Because literature, if you compare it to what Shakespeare created, I think it has stayed with us even today because it has always worked on an intuitive reflection. So, as I mentioned in the very beginning of my talk, that it creates not only a dialogic coexistence, but at the same time, it leaves an echo behind which is collectively shared with all of us. And I think it is only through the songs that today Bhardwaj is able to achieve, because considering the violent atmosphere in Kashmir, and also the violence, the betrayals in Makbul, and that is what I actually meant, and that is why I wanted to explore the songs per se.
Um, Thank you for that. Also, yes, I get what Shumadi is trying to say is to address the politics that is there, as also Chandradasanji kept on mentioning that, and also today Swarna Malyaji, that if we leave everything to the poetic reconciliation, then perhaps this importance of the struggle gets somewhere lost. And also, and there's another thing it just came to my mind as with the insertion of an already existing musical, almost or rather performative genre, band into this film also, and to bring it within the sphere of melody, where we get to see that it goes and to bring the entire story into one fold, and that is through a song. It had been there. Also, we find we can trace it to not necessarily to the Natya tradition, but it is there. It's a always a so they create a absolute space in there. Okay, it's a no space, but this particular space is again politicized. So that's also you perhaps would like to go back to when you talk about musicality, and that perhaps would be a wonderful thing.
Yes, I would surely incorporate this in my paper.
No, you don't have to incorporate. I'm just saying that these are the observations that
No,
it
of course,
really
but
came
no,
to us.
actually the thing is that this naivety and this politics that you mentioned, it is I have mentioned this in context of the songs itself. When
Right.
if you remember the song which Arshia, which is Shraddha Kapoor, she talks, she's unthreading the muffler after she's lost the father, and she's the mood of the folk song completely changes. And then
Right.
when you juxtapose it against Fez's ghazal, it creates a wider spectrum. But then if I add the politics of the folk instruments, as you mentioned in the previous discussions as well, I think it would be a very enriching insight, because that is one of the strands that I would really like to explore.
Well, thank you so much, Kritika, and thank
Thank you.
you, Dr. Soma Mukherjee, for contributing into this discussion. And so, in the end, it becomes that how we perceive things, and perhaps we move towards appreciate art as, when it comes to art, as also again Manjula says, that we need to leave it to the appreciation, not readily to judge it, or unlike literature, to find perhaps the nitty-gritties. The first thing that comes up is the appeal of it. So on this note, I would like to invite our next speaker. We have Chirosri Roy. I welcome Chirosri. To introduce her with some humble words is that Chirosri is an ODC practitioner. She has done her post-graduation in philosophy from Presidency University, Kolkata, and she's recipient of the Senior Scholarship from the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, and an A-graded artist of Doordarshan. And no wonder she picks up her subject of study for the reflection today. And today her paper is titled Art Appreciation from the Lens of Indian Philosophical Discourse. Chirosri, over to you.
Good afternoon to all the fellow presenters. I'm thankful to Sangeet Natak Akademi and Chidakash Kalalay for organizing this seminar and considering me eligible to present the paper. My topic is art appreciation. Now, art appreciation is a very dyadic process involving art experience of both performer and spectator, and their communication is a very primal focus here. I try to explore the nature of art appreciation in case of Indian performing art. So, of course, I try to adhere the underlying Indian philosophical perspective from a phenomenological point of view. When we say art appreciation, first few things that comes to our mind are embodied experience, first-hand experience, immediateness, wholesomeness, the residual effect, and last but not the least, empathy. I will discuss first four simultaneously, as these are interrelated. Now, what is embodied experience? Phenomenology discards the Cartesian idea of body and mind. They believe in lived experience. So they are saying when we are experiencing, we are living through it. So in that case, the dichotomy of mind and body cannot be maintained. It comes as a composite whole. The experience comes as a composite whole. Now, the Indian concept of embodied is similar, but it delves much deeper. For them, embodied is Sharira plus Atman. Now, Sharira is not just confluence of flesh, bone, and muscles. Sharira is body and man, buddhi, chitta, ahankar. So, Sharira and Atman makes the cosmic being Purusha. So, Purusha is a microcosmic organism comprising interdependent and distinct parts. It exists in physical time and space, but it has immanent potency of intuiting what lies beyond. There comes Brahman. Now, Brahman is also Purusha, he's macro Purusha, supra being. Now, being, I don't think being is the right word to use, because when we say being, we limit it to the physical time and space. But Brahman is a all-pervasive transcendental avastha. And it cannot be grasped through sensory experiences. Only intuitive knowledge is possible of it. Now, Atman is the gateway that connects us to the Brahman. So, here we are talking about the wholesomeness, and it's connected to universality. Now, if we take a look at the structure of Indian theater, as Bharata codified it, it is like an organism. It's like it gives a totality of experience, and it comprises so many parts. Now we will discuss all of this later. First-hand experience and immediate experience is used interchangeably in phenomenology, because immediate experience refers to direct givenness of experience devoid of any mediate source. So that makes the experience first-hand. But I will try to explain first-hand experience and immediateness here separately. Let's discuss first-hand experience. So to pacify energies, offering homage to cosmos through yajna and puja was prevalent ritual at that point. Bharata implicated same thing in his theater. He called it Ranga Puja. So marking the seat of the deities, identifying the center, the peripheral area, and marking stage divisions is kind of equivalent to placing altars and Vedi. So the next question is, what is used here for offering? I would say the dancers themselves. The mantratmak purvaranga performance is the offering. So what is the significance of it? First, the symbolic cleansing of the arena to ward off evil so that the performance happens without any hindrance. Second, transformation of the neutral performative space into an infinite cosmic one where drama will unfold. In Purvaranga, dancers perform Karana and Angahar, which was said to be included on suggestion of Shiva. Now, as Indian classical art practitioner, many of us, we say that Shiva's dance is cosmic dance. Why is it cosmic dance? Because Shiva dances in metaphysical time and space. Now, dancers do the same dance. It is like a declaration that we are no more in physical space. We are entering realm of drama, and journey towards infinitude starts from here. So before the presentation of drama, the consecrational ritual and Purvaranga performance, it not only sacralizes or transforms the performative space, it is cleansing the palate of the spectator. It's sharpening the receptive power so that rasanubhuti becomes more intense. Such anubhuti is always incorporeal. Again, we will discuss it later. Before we go to immediateness, let us discuss wholesomeness. In first segment, we have already talked about organism, whole. It's a whole comprising of interdependent but distinct parts. Now, drama is also an organism consisting of nritya, gita, vadya, kavya, shahitya, shilpa, sthapatya, etc. So, and it encompasses Triloka and Trikala, as Bharat is mentioning. To present something like this, artists need to be conceptually sound. Now, skill is not skill is not enough. So, how can the artist be conceptually sound? Through conceptual deliberation and conscious learning. Conscious learning is important. So, actors, through this process, finally master the art of depersonalization. It means cessation of personal ego. In this state, the oscillation of Raja and Tama are ceased, and mind is elevated to level of Sattva. So Sattva is a reflective state. The more reflective the Sattva will be, the brighter the character will shine. By character, I mean what characters the actors play on stage. Now, when Bharata is talking about Anudarshana, Anukirtana, Anucharita, he's not talking about mere imitation. Through drama, Bharata is constructing a realm of Nama and Rupa, taking references from physical world. And bliss of experiencing such drama is felt only through realization of Pararupa. It is revealed to the actors when he gains intuitive knowledge of Natya Ved. Now I will discuss the immediateness of experience. By immediateness, in phenomenology, it means qualitative experience. It is referred as what it is like experience, what it's like to be in a particular state. Inference of such experience isn't possible. It can only be intuited. By qualitative experience in Indian philosophy, it means both enriching with flavors and the act of experiencing it. Now, bhava and rasa are primal force behind art experience and communication. How bhava originated in kavi or actor creator channelizes in rasika, and they both experience the alaukika anubhuti from release of rasa has been a integral part of discussion in Indian aesthetics. Now, these four segments that we discussed, from it, one thing is clear that Bharata has strived to reach a state of samanya. He has codified a system which is all encompassing. Now, he is talking about synergy of performer and spectator. Bhattanayaka has called it sadharanikaran. According to him, aesthetic bhavana has power to bring about rasa. It's that power which unifies Raja and Tama and uplifts them to the state of pure sattva. When it happens, the art experience felt by both actor and rasika is free from individuation, and it emerges a state akin to Brahmasvada. It is a state of pure bliss. So, continuing from this, I would like to add Abhinava Bharati's view also here. But before that, I'd like to share views of transcendental phenomenology. So transcendental phenomenology accepts that essence of object is appeared to our consciousness. So conscious mind has intentionality. By intentionality, it means aboutness. That means we become aware of the world only by being aware of self. So self is not pure consciousness, inactive consciousness. Consciousness is active. So how do we become aware of the world and aware of other subjects. Transcendental phenomenologists are saying by empathy, by putting ourselves in other shoes. Now, Indian philosophy agrees to this view somewhat. Abhinavagupta shared his view of Rasanubhuti from Shaivism's perspective. Absolute, he is saying absolute is not self-luminous. It is self-conscious and dynamic as well. So absolute can manifest itself into multiplicity but remain unmanifested. Now, whatever moves, we feel its abhas. Now, absolute is also a state of abhas because it is experienceable. In order to experience, there has to be self. And without self, we can't be conscious. When we say we are conscious, generally we are conscious of something. So when we say self-conscious, self has the power of making itself knowable or experienceable, which is impossible without Shakti. So Shiva Shakti is one unitary absolute which has potency of multiplicity, and realizing that state causes experience of Chamatkar. And it leads to the final two segments of my discussion, that is residue of experience and empathy. According to Indian aestheticians, enjoying a good performance is like enjoying a flavorful meal. So when we have good meal, with each bite, we absorb all the flavors of it, and even after, the taste remains. After experiencing a fulfilling presentation, the feeling of engrossment doesn't fade away immediately. The residual taste lingers for a long time. Now, in terms of phenomenology, we can understand it as affectedness. It means when we experience emotive states, it affects our consciousness of surrounding. For an example, if I'm in love, love has no locatedness like pain sensation. So when I feel love, uh, the world appears to me in a certain way. For an instance, the world might look more colorful. Similarly, when I'm depressed, the world looks very much gloomy to me. So there, the question arises how we become aware of other subjects. So there, again, phenomenologists are saying by empathy. It leads to the last and concluding segment of my discussion. According to Abhinavagupta, Rasaswadan is an experience of quietude or Vishranti, as he called it, Hridaya Vishranti. The silence felt here is not void. Silence is very much Vangmay. When we watch an enthralling performance, so much happens inside. So it's not chaotic, but it gives us a very soothing effect. Now, at this point, focus has shifted from actors to the Rasika. Journey of art experiences is initiated by the performer, and it ends with the spectator. To present something as vast and meticulous as Bharata's theatre, actors, as we talked about, that actors need to be conscious. They need to reach a state of equilibrium, and so that they can achieve the higher level of sattva. Now, is similar thing can be said about the Rasika. To experience something as enriching as Bharata's theatre, Rasika needs to be attuned and attentive as well. And how can they reach such state? So it is said that by being Saridaya or by being an empath, only then Rasika can absorb all the essence of it, and this total absorption leads to equanimity and unanimity. So this is it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Chirasri, for sharing your thoughts. I hope we have been able to do justice to at least your time frame. Uh, for the other, she's joining us from the UK, and the time frame had earlier been quite difficult. However, I have one observation though, but before that, I would like to open the session to the others. If anybody would like to ask any question or share any observation, may do so. All right. When it comes to so wonderfully you have mentioned about the process of being a Sahridaya and the importance of being a Sahridaya in order to properly appreciate art. Of course, that goes without saying. It also reminds me of certain prerogatives that Abhinav Gupta sets forth in the first chapter, where he asks to the audience at least to have, not in a very elaborate philosophical way, but how should they perceive, how should they look at art by shedding away the all the different kind of the performance should not deem like a dream to them. So this is how the no perception that you have, you bring in all your preconceived notions, if we may put it away, all that. So, and a lot of people have already, they say that in India, perhaps we do not have what we call is art appreciation or the process of it. And absolutely, I deny this. And also, you have answered another thing, which there has been quite a bit of, as Shumati mentioned, this problematized term called South Asia and South Asian studies also. A lot of instances we have observed earlier where people try to look at the experience of rasa or quote unquote rasa theory in estrangement of the philosophical point of view, to just to look it as it is, then what it is. It is neither an entity nor a space. How do you perceive it? So this is so wonderful you have brought into being as a preparation of an actor and preparation of an audience through Purvaranga. So that was wonderful. If you could add anything more or share anything else, you may, or else otherwise I have enjoyed it.
Yes, what I find interesting in the course that uh, why I added my view of phenomenology, because I have always been inclined to Western philosophy, and in course of my MA year, I was introduced to phenomenology. There, I found out that each phenomenology is basically including embodied experience, including lived experience. So it's not saying that consciousness is something a pure consciousness. It's not an inactive consciousness. It is the consciousness is the way we look at the world, how we are aware of the world, but or rather how world is appeared to us. So this concept of active consciousness stuck with me. Now, very in recent couple of years, um, I am taking interest in Indian philosophy. The interest in Indian philosophy is growing because of Piyal sir, of course, and Parvati Datta ma'am. As I attended a few lectures in Mahagami, so there, then I dared to read few texts of Kapila Vatsyayan, and what I found out that Shaivism has talked about this active consciousness thousands of years ago, and the way Abhinava Gupta has incorporated the view in case of art appreciation, in case of Rasanubhuti, uh, it is wonderful, and it is very much insightful. And one thing I really loved about uh, and I appreciate about Bharata's um, system of theater art, that it is very flexible. It is very inclusive. Uh, he has given utmost importance to loka, to the people. and which makes it bigger as a spectrum, and it leaves so much space for interpretation and you know cognitive thinking.
Of course, and with that space left, we all can dwell in there and we can perhaps create a sense of our own space. Thank you, Chirasri, for this.
Thank you so much.
We have been talking about various interpretations and the space that is created through retellings, and of course how characters they are perceived as space and how do they dwell in order to create a new way. And the speaker who's about to present her paper next is going to touch upon one of the texts which is really close to my heart. So I welcome Mehak Kumar. To introduce Mehak, she is, what should I say, that we all part of one clan. We have here Shumadi from Comparative Literature. Also, Ipshita Chando was there, and she too is a student of Comparative Literature, postgraduate student at Jadavpur University, Kolkata. Her areas of interest are South Asian literature, the Ramayana repertoire, feminist literature, and women's studies and popular culture. Today, she is going to present her paper titled Singing the Survival, Looking at Chandravati's Ramayana and Baromashi songs as a mode of articulating Sita's resilience. So, Mehak, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. I would like to thank the organizers for providing me with this opportunity to present my thoughts in this very esteemed seminar. And one feels equally excited and intimidated when they are presenting amidst such erudite scholars. I would begin my paper. Chandrabhuti was a 16th century poet from medieval Bengal who has been regarded as the first female poet in Bangla literature. She had acquired lessons from her father, Dijobangshee, who was one of the authors of the genre Monasha Mongol. Her compositions include Molua Sundari and Doshu Kenaram, but it is Chandrabhuti's Ramayana that emerges as the first Bangla Ramayana from the perspective of Sita, wife of Ram, the pivotal hero of Valmiki's Adikavya, the Ramayana. Her compositions are part of a widespread Bangla literary genre known as Palagan or Gitika, its English equivalent being a ballad. Chandrabhuti's text was lost until revived by Bengali literary historians Dinesh Chandra Sen in his Moymonsinho Gitika, published in 1923, and Kshitish Chandra Maulik in his Purvabanga Gitika, published from 1971 to 1975. However, Chandrabhuti's Ramayana was dismissed by critics as being an incomplete and stylistically weak Ramayana. Eminent Indian author Nobunita Debsen points out how Chandrabhuti discarded the classical Sanskritic tradition by composing Ramayana in her own regional language, Bangla. She further posits that if women's literary creations emerge as fragmentary or incomplete, the causality lies in their real lives being fragmentary, reflecting the woman's world in its entirety. Much about Chandrabhuti's life is known from Nayanchand Ghosh's ballad titled Chandrabhuti, which narrates how she faced betrayal when her fiancé Joyanando abandoned her on their wedding day and she sought her father's permission to remain single, who insisted her to write the Ramayana, a rebellious act in itself in a society for a Lagna woman, or a woman whose auspicious moment of wedding has been disrupted. Nobunita Debsen mentions that when women choose to retell an epic, many alternative narratives emerge, as the male author's epic world of chivalric men and their battles consist of women getting abducted or humiliated, containing not much values and ideals for women to share. Therefore, she suggests Chandrabhuti chooses to retell the epic vis-a-vis a woman's point of view, which is Sita's perspective, the story allowing her to use the narrative template of Sita's grief and abandonment to channelize her own personal tragedy. Chandrabhuti's Ramayana commences the tale in a subversive manner, with a description of the exploits of Rakshas king Ravan, whereas Valmiki's Ramayana deals with the birth story and activities of its hero Ram in its inception. Chandravati makes a shift from Valmiki when she gives narrative space for Ravan's wife Mandodari's grief to surface in reaction to her husband's despotism. And Chandravati mentions, and I quote, when Queen Mandodari heard this news, her eyes overflowed with tears of wounded pride. Unquote. Sita is born miraculously from an egg, which is a result of Mandodari's consuming poison out of grief, where Sita is fated to erase Ravan's clan and bring destruction for Lanka. Sita's birth is interpolated by Chandravati in the aforesaid manner in order to show, as Ipshita Chanda puts it, the destruction of golden Lanka resulting from an insult and exile to Lakshmi, the auspicious feminine power of Sita, where Ram is placed at the background. This becomes subversive as Chandravati breaks the accepted pattern by putting Sita's miraculous birth story first and wraps up the section with Ram and his brother's birth stories at the end, where the rule asks for a reverse order. Nabanita Devshan mentions how Chandravati subverts a male-influenced epic tradition in both content and form by allowing her Ramayana to trace major events and experiences in Sita's life, consciously incorporating women-centric Baromashi songs to compose an epic and bring out Sita's subjectivity and sentiments in the process. She further mentions how this enables Sita to appear as the protagonist rather than Ram, making Chandravati's Ramayana an oral Sitayana, all the while adhering to the crucial theme of Indian epics, which is the conflict between good and evil. While Valmiki's Ramayana enunciated this in the battle between Ram and Ravan, where good was reinstated over evil by the slaying of the Rakshas Ravan by Ram, Chandravati presents this struggle, as Nabanita Devshan points out, in Sita versus Kukua, her evil sister-in-law, as the conflict between Lakshmi and Alakshmi. Chandravati posits Kukua as being responsible for creating rift between Sita and Ram, but in this female space, one woman does not eliminate the other. When Kukua enthusiastically arrives at Sita's Agni Pariksha to light her pyre, the wind makes her catch the fire instead. And Chandravati writes, and I quote, seeing her weeping Queen Sita with her lotus palms healed and cooled off Kukua's burning body. Unquote. This enables good to preside over evil while reiterating Sita's divine greatness. The egg is kept in a golden casket and banished by Ravan, which reaches an impoverished couple, Madho, a fisherman, and his wife Sata in Mithila. Sata worships the golden casket reverentially, and Chandravati writes how Sata's home became Lakshmi's residence. Sita is handed over to the royal family of Janak as Sata gets a Shopnadesh, or instructions in dream to do so, which is a popular literary trope of Bengali literature, and Sata requests the child be named after her. This allows the divine royalty Sita to be named after a rural woman, Sata, further enhancing the text's receptibility in the rural Bengali milieu. Chandravati uses the epithet Janam Dukhini, or one born to suffer, for both Sita and Sata, while she refers herself as Obhagini, or the ill-fated one, in her prologue found elsewhere. This makes Sita, Chandravati, and other women persecuted at the whims of patriarchy become sisters in sorrow, as Nabanita Devshan uses the term, where these mistreated women become part of a historical continuum. As Ipshita Chanda writes, Chandravati Sita is not a symbol of chastity or suffering womanhood. Instead, she becomes, and I quote, a person, a woman, who speaks the same language as the women in the audience, unquote. Chandravati brings in several such interpolations in her composition in order to make it relatable to her audience, who were the rural Bengali women. The idea of an impoverished fisherman family is common to the oral repertoire of riverine rural Bengal, and the notion of an evil nonod or sister-in-law who puts the bride into trouble in attempts to separate her from her husband is another shared knowledge within rural women in India. Further, repeated references to goddess Lakshmi in Chandrapati Ramayana is rooted in the Bengali cultural ethos, where the concept of Lokhi Me, or the ideal daughter, is an essential component, disrupting whom vanishes the wealth, prosperity, and sanctity of the household or the kingdom, as seen in Lanka and Ayodhya's subsequent destructions, when Ravan and Ram choose to banish Sita, the Lakshmi incarnate. Thus, it can be seen that Chandrapati's Ramayana compresses two vastly distinct time and space, or chronotope, as Russian philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin uses the term to describe how spatio-temporal relationships remain intrinsically connected and are artistically expressed in literature. And the artistic chronotope is characterized by the fusion of the spatio-temporal indicators into one concrete whole. This finds prominence in Chandrabhuti's Ramayana as she borrows from Valmiki's much ancient tale and remodels it according to her own spatio-temporal Bengali ethos, focusing on the female time and space in Sita's experiences that deviates from Valmiki's text. This brings us to the question: do Sita's Baromashi songs act as a mode of her resilience to articulate her survival? The paper father looks at this question with the help of Sita's Baromashi songs that Chandrabhoti dedicates an entire section to in the narrative. Chandrabhoti makes a paradigmatic shift when she enables Sita to sing her story via the Baromashi songs, where Sita is the narrator of her life story, which she articulates on her female friend's behest after returning to Ayodhya from Lanka. Sita addresses them as Sakhigan, or female companions, the mode of address that Chandrabhoti uses to address her female audience as well, signifying a predominantly female space. The word Baromashi literally means 12 months, where Baro means 12 and Mash means month, indicating the cycle of months starting from the month of Boishak and ending in Choitro. It is usually sung by women, depicting their misery, hardship, and emotional turmoil throughout the 12 months of a year. Indian literary critic Shubha Chakraborty Dasgupta notes that Baromashi is an ancient Bengali verse form, widely prevalent in the oral or Desi tradition, where each month gives a particular account of the nuances of the love evoked and suffering on separation from the beloved, while incorporating the lamentations of a deserted woman that asserts a rhythmic cyclical movement in the whole of nature, despite the disruption on the microcosm of the personal level. Similar thematic thrusts are found in Sita's Baromashi. Lamenting about her ill fate as a Janam Dukhini, Sita narrates the miraculous story of her birth, her marriage with Ram, and starts her Baromashi by recollecting her experiences in exile beginning from the month of Boishak. She proceeds towards her happy moments of conjugal life with Ram, her abduction by Ravan, and how she was rescued. Sita describes her sorrow and pain by recounting the rainy season of Ashar as, and I quote, "the clouds did not have as much water as Sita's eyes had," unquote. Valmiki's narrative involved an entire section of Yuddhakanda dedicated to the crucial war, followed by the appearance of Love and Kush, Ram's son, and heirs of the kingdom of Ayodhya, who narrated almost the entire story of Ramayana to Ram. Chandrabhoti makes a significant departure from this by enabling Ayodhya's Queen Sita to narrate majority of the Ramayana in her Baromashi song, where the virulent battlefield takes a backseat and the focus is on the internal feminine world of suffering, grief, and fear while living in captivity, along with the viraha on separation from her husband. Sita depicts events of and before the war occurring in her absence in form of dreams, which Navanita Devshin puts as Chandrabhuti's meticulous narrative logic, because Sita was absent when the events of the war took place, which dreams can only give her partial access to. Sita's lamentation takes a subjective turn when she sings her very particular female experiences, and I quote, "If I knew there was so much suffering in Sita's lot, I would have gone with my lord to catch the deer," pronounced again when her captivity in Lanka is replete with grief. And I quote again, "I lived as an ascetic despite my youth, abundant sleep and sustenance. My hair became tangled. I had hung on to my life only to see my lot again. Thus, Chandravati foregrounds the female experience, giving voice to Sita's suffering and offering her the scope to narrate her story via her Baromashi song, where the very act of articulation becomes an act of survival. Displaying her resilience, the storytelling process incorporates enunciation of the emotional facet of how the events affected her personally. This provides Sita's character with agency, as the capacity for self determination emerges when she articulates her experiences in the song as a survival, rather than silently absorbing every adversity as the ideal deified woman that she's depicted to be elsewhere. Chandrabhuti's rendition of Ramayana usually, sorry, Chandrabhuti's rendition of Ramayana allows the usually deified Ram and Sita to become humanized by displaying essentially human emotions of fear and sorrow, seen even in Ram as he weeps about his ill fate due to the curses of Tara and Mandodari, and he laments, and I quote, "My happy family is burning today in a wildfire. I can no more stand the fire kindled by the curses of chaste women." Unquote. Here, Tara and Mandodari are women from the Vanar and the Rakshas clans, respectively, who are not part of the mainstream epic narrative, and Chandrabhuti subtly assigns them a brief yet powerful position, as their sufferings are crucial enough to bring grief to the pivotal epic hero. Thus, one can conclude that, indeed, Sita's Baromashi songs do act as a medium that enables the articulation of her resilience and survival, providing her with agency, via Chandrabhuti's retelling that subverts a male influenced epic tradition. Nobunita Devshin puts forward the idea that the act of heroism signifies man's superhuman ability to stand and overcome human suffering, which Sita displays in Chandrabhuti's Ramayana, not with epic battle or weapons, but with moral values. She mentions that Chandrabhuti stands as a dissenter outside the narrative, and I quote, "Sita wins the battle by fighting with the traditional weapons of value supplied by the dominant ideology of Chandrabhuti's time, whereas Chandrabhuti herself, as the narrator composer, is challenging the same values in the very structure of the narrative. This displays resistance on fictional and actual levels. The use of the mode of song becomes equally significant, as it is an alternative and accessible mode of articulation for women without formal education in the rural context. Chandrabhuti also undertakes an oppositional reading of the Ramayana, as Jamaican sociologist Stuart Hall uses the term to indicate that when a viewer, or a reader for this matter, perfectly understands both the literal and connotative meaning of a text or event, but chooses to decode the message in a contrary way within some alternative framework of reference, something that Chandrabhuti successfully does in her Ramayana composition. Chandrabhuti's depiction of Sita and her tribulations make her farther accessible to the other women in the audience, as she emerges as an every woman, assigning Sita's suffering as the suffering of the women in the rural community, entering a collective domain of community consciousness. As Indian scholar A.K. Ramanujan mentions about Ramayana adaptations, and I quote, "The various Ramayana texts relate to prior texts directly, to borrow or refute, but they relate to each other through this common code or common pool." Unquote. He further writes how every author brings out a unique crystallization or a new text with unique texture and a fresh context. And I quote again, "In India and in Southeast Asia, no one ever reads the Ramayana or the Mahabharata for the first time. The stories are there always already." Unquote. Thus, Chandrabhuti's Ramayana becomes another crystallization in the multifarious and diverse Ramayana repertoire worldwide, where she engages with the pool of signifiers, ensuring the story of Ramayana continues with new myriad perspectives, while allowing alternative perspectives like that of Sita to emerge, enabling her story to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehak, for bringing in Chandravati into the domain of discussion. I would like to now open the session. If anybody would like to ask any question, just as to add, as you were reading, we were also reading, especially the translation of Navonita Di, I believe, that you had corroborated. So she has been quite a endearing teacher to us. However, so I would like to open the session if anybody would like to ask any question. Or else I myself have a few things to ask and add, which I will. So if I may add two things. The first thing is that when you talk about the songs, okay, so and Baromashi song, so have you found any equivalent in any sort of tradition? And how does that bring in, of course, I'm not talking about, you have already done in quite extensive way the dealing of the content, but I'm talking about as a form. Because when we necessarily put or use the word song, it is not just the text. Okay, it is the performative mode as well. And also you have talked about the point Baromashi. So is there any particular nitty-gritty that is associated with the living of the people as we are trying to understand, that it's a cultural space, so with the life, and how do you discern perhaps? So it's just from a very naive point of view, because I am not really an expert of this. So I just wanted to know, but as a performing text, perhaps how would you like to read this, since they are Baromashi songs?
Well, I am no performer myself, but I've only done textual readings of the Baramashi songs so far. And as I mentioned, Shubha Chakraborty Dashgupta, she mentions in her particular article, which is perhaps titled The Aspects of Baramashi Song in Bengal. I'm not sure of the title. I'll just check and let you know. She talks about how this form of Baramashi is present in all over northern India and also in Assam in various other names like the Baramahina performative genre. But when we're talking about the living tradition, right? Like as Shoma Mukherjee ma'am mentioned, that these texts, these are the inherited texts. So these are present in the very much in the living tradition. So Baromashi does not only deal with the lamentations and suffering of the woman, it's intrinsically connected to also several religious themes. And also it's very intrinsically connected to the agrarian community. So, for example, there is also another aspect of Baromashi where the idea of Khonar Bochon, or when there's this person called Khona, and when she prophesizes about various things related to the various seasons. So that is also sometimes incorporated in the Baromashi genre. So I am not very aware of the performative aspect of Baromashi, which I will definitely look at after this seminar. But in terms of textual reading, definitely Baromashi is a voice, it's a vast repertoire, and I think it requires a separate paper to deal with it in itself.
Well, that's very well put. Because I simply put this forward, since you have mentioned as a song, and song invariably invokes this sense of performativity. There is also a wonderful resource person, if I might add, Sujit Mukherjee from your department itself. You may go back and, sorry, Sujit Kumar Mondal, right? Yeah, sorry, very sorry. So you can go back to him perhaps to understand this performativity that's there. And also, I wanted to understand, since you talk about Baromashi, so there is, Shumadi also mentioned about the sense of Samvatsar, that also we have been talking about, the greater scheme of time that revolves around. And from there, when you cut in, so, of course, you have mentioned, well, to put it personally, I do not know how Ram has become man, because he has already been man. Because the moment you put any of the idea or entity as a character into a bodily form, it itself takes the shape of a man. As we have been talking about, that character itself becomes an actor. An actor is nothing but a human body, or at least the perceiving to in this way. What we can do, as again to go back to Varakheriji's opening speech of the very first today's discussion, today's session, is that we thrust upon our attributes on it. And so we corroborate in this way. And to also again go back to Chirosri, that it is perhaps we try to perceive an abhas, this apparent emanation that comes. But of course, they are human beings or beings, if not, or state, as Chirosri says. So if you would like to think about it in that way, and in there comes the plurality, that how we perceive that particular state or whatever it is, that can be creative state, that can be the way you name it, because again, in the end is Brahman Upakriya. But the question is, how would you like to corroborate the sense of Samvatsar and Baromashi? Is there, do you find any
Yes.
difference? Yes.
I
Or similar?
would first like to talk about the point you mentioned, that how does Ram become a man? Because he's already a character, right? But what I was actually indicating, due to the time constraints, I can go into it in details. But in Valmiki's Ramayana, Ram is essentially a very human character. It's not until the Uttarkanda that we find that Ram is corroborated with Vishnu as an avatar, or as an avatar of Vishnu. But later retellings, as time progresses, they have often tried to deify Ram, and for Chandravati, she has deified Sita as well. So these come from the particular locations that the author choose to retell their retellings from. For example, in 17th century, Tulsidas writes Ramcharitmanas, and it emerges from the Bhakti tradition. So Ram essentially has to be deified there because he has a particular I'm not sure if agenda is the right term, but he has a particular motive to talk about Ramcharitmanas, like it's about the greatness of Ram. It's inherent in the title itself. And Chandravati is talking about Sita. So she has deified Sita here, and when she is deifying Sita, she has to deify Ram. Because if like the woman, the female counterpart is a goddess and the man is not, then that becomes a little bit disturbing in the balance of the status quo, in the power status quo. And secondly, you asked about the Samvatsar. Well, I'm not, again, my lack of knowledge is expressed here, that I'm not very much well aware of the idea of the Samvatsar. But yes, Samvatsar, I actually had the very fortunate opportunity to watch the performance of Samvatsar Katha by Chidakash Kalalay. And what was really fascinating is that how each and every season was represented on stage by the human characters, and they transition so seamlessly. So it is again a flow of time through different spaces, but the stage is a fixed space. But it's the characters, it's the actors, their performance rather, their acting enables the flow of time and space to emerge on the stage. So if I'm going to consider Samvatsar as the flow of time and the flow of seasons, then definitely Baromashi incorporates that flow of season throughout the 12 months of the year. So there can be definitely similarities. Again, I have to mention Shubha Chakraborty Dashgupta here, because she said that Baromashi is found mainly in the oral tradition, but it is also found in the written tradition. And the oral, as folk is a problematic term, is an essentialist category we have mentioned already. So I have mentioned the term Desi tradition. So when Baromashi is written down, or perhaps when it's found in the Margya tradition, then we can perhaps relate it to Samvatsar, because Samvatsar comes from that classical Sanskrit repertoire. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I am
Unmute you.
You're not audible.
Yeah. So, yes, thank you for putting this, and it would be wonderful if we see you corroborating this performative aspect. But I think we cannot let you go because we also have a Ramkatha tradition specialist with us. So, if
No,
she
no,
would
no.
like to share any
No, I'm
observation.
not a specialist, Deep. Now, I am thinking about the fact that there is a book called Baromasha in Indian literatures. Now, the book was published by Motilal Banarasi, Songs of 12 Months in Indo-Aryan Literatures, where you will find that even Mullah Daud actually wrote Baromashi in Chandrayaan. And there are Muhammad Jaishi's Nagmati Baramasa, say that they are there in the original Nagri scripts. Rajmati Varamasa, it is called, and then there are even old Daker Bachon from Bengal there. So if you want, you can look at that particular book probably that will give you say probably another perspective when you are putting this particular argument. What probably Deep is trying to ask is that that when we are talking about these forms, when he is talking about the form, that if you are looking at Navanitadi's translation of Chandravati Ramayan, and in the afterward when Ipshitadi actually talked about that how uh, the structural analysis of epic, if we kind of borrow from Navanita's earlier work of, say, the thematic analysis of epic in East and West, where she actually talked about certain theme, she mentioned them as theme. Probably, I will say that they are motif, that the hero's supernatural birth is a theme, according to her. Like this is a pattern which she encountered in many of the, say, the epics in East and West, and they are related to the journey of see the hero within the text and the action of the text, or maybe the way the episodes are progressing. These themes or motifs, they are associated with that particular action. And what Ipshitadi is arguing here is that when we are reading a particular text, if it is, say, an epic or Mahakabya or Itihash, and if I have my prior experience of reading a particular form, then I am entering that particular text with those kind of expectations. Like if I borrow, say, the Yause's theory of, say, the horizons of expectation, and how see these thematic contents like Ekdeশে এক রাজা ছিল or once upon a time there was a king, I will enter this particular text with the expectation of a, say, the fairy tale. In a similar manner, that epic or Mahakabya will talk about, mostly will talk about, say, the birth story of the hero, but there will be some quote unquote marvelous or supernatural elements. But what Ipshita is arguing is that how we are organizing these elements. And I would rather say add that what kind of meaning these, say, the themes or motif they are bringing, and how we are organizing that will kind of shift the boundary of a fixed form, and it will extend to another direction, or probably another form will or genre will emerge. What Deep was probably trying to say is that that there can be text which will share, say, the Baramasha is that in our usual understanding, it is about, say, the 12 months, say the people who are singing songs, and they are associated those songs in, say, the with the, say, the 12 months. But when the female, say, the poets, or maybe the writers, when they are associating, or maybe the idea of epic and the Baramasha song, they are interacting with each other. And if you look at this particular book of, say, the Baramasha in Indian literature, then you will realizes that it is not only the women, even, say, the quote unquote men writers, they are also doing that. So in a way, these texts are, in a way, are amalgamation, or maybe they are overlapping, that as far as the form or structure is concerned, that it is, in one way, it is about the, say, the content, but it is also about the structure, because content, in a way, establish or shape the idea of a structure or genre of a particular text. And if it is established through, say, the several texts, that this particular kind of writing can be possible, and these will be there, then it is a established genre. But there are elements within that particular genre where, by extending or maybe experimenting with those, say, the units, you will probably move towards a new genre. I don't know whether it, say, the Deep was trying to ask this particular question or not.
Yes, what we are all playing here, perhaps with the words, the Nama and Rupa. So we talk about temporal dynamics. So what to sum it up, or of course, Mehak can also later on add if she wishes, is that to understand that Baromasya, there is, of course, one conceptual idealization that what is can be Baromasya. Okay, so, and that happens at a particular space, within a particular societal space, right? And that partakes, as Shumadi says, the word genre. I say it's a literary space that takes up. So automatically we have got three layers of space. And then there comes the notion of time. Okay. And of course, then you go even deeper, as Ikshari says, that we continue to zoom in and in and in to see the the pluralities. And there what come that there's another space, a particular space that is created by Chandravati. So, and there if she stands out and how. And through this performance, we get to see. And this is how, all the time, as the title of the seminar also goes, that we interplay with this horizon of expectation as the merging of spaces in order to create our own creative space. So if I have summarized this correctly, Shumadi, and Mag would be the best judge for it.
No, obviously, she has an argument. She can look at
course,
these
of course.
materials, and if these in a way, will help her to kind of substantiate her argument more profoundly, then that will be helpful for her. But it's entirely her decision.
No, I would really thank both of you for giving me such wonderful insights, because I had no idea about this resources and these alternative ideas. So thank you, Shoma Mukherjee ma'am, and thank you, sir, for all of these wonderful insights.
Shoma Mukherjee ma'am, sorry.
Okay.
You can say Shomadi or anything else, not Shoma Mukherjee ma'am.
So this is why we need to create these spaces, and this is why we have actually devised this seminar. To conclude the day, I would like to assert that what we had in mind is perhaps not to pinpoint any particular genre or any particular way, but to understand the process as we all have been trying to understand, as through a myriad of ways of perceiving spaces, be it creative, be it societal, be it a character space, be it a literary space, or be it a performative space, or the space of performance per se, or as a notional space, or even the space of my previous learning, that it creates a space in mind, if not talking about biologically, but at least mental space, inner space. So myriads of ways. And there it comes interplay of time in it. And with this, they create a fabric of creation to understand that. And this is why we kept the title loose and lucid, perhaps, for everyone to interpret as they want, as we wish to learn and know more and more. I thank you all the presenters for coming together today and to create this dialogue, this enriching dialogue that we have been having. Today, I would like to conclude with this, and I expect all of you to come also for the last day tomorrow. We begin at 10 a.m. with the opening speech of Shatavdhani R. Ganesh. So we might perhaps find today we have dealt with literature and songs and perspective, and he would like to bring all of them together through, of course, literatures from Sanskrit and Kavya Shastra. So thank you, all of you, and I would like to draw a conclusion here. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Deep. And see you tomorrow.
See you. Thank you, Shubhendu. I believe now Satya Kendra can close the meeting.